I've always been drawn to silence. Not the peaceful kind you find on a remote trail or at the edge of a still lake, but the heavy kind. The kind that feels intentional, unnatural, like the world itself is holding its breath. I wasn't supposed to be there. My name won't show up on any official reports. I was hired on contract as a drone operator, brought in last minute after the primary surveyor backed out. No explicación. Just a note left on the agency's desk and a forfeited retainer. The village, its name redacted even in our briefing, was nestled at the edge of a dense forest, isolated enough that it didn't even show up on most modern maps. An agricultural settlement, supposedly self-sufficient, known for a particularly sweet strain of apple that had recently become popular with boutique cider companies. I'd never heard of the place. None of us had. Communications with the village had abruptly ceased 10 days prior. No cell signals, no radio. An inspection team was dispatched, but they never checked in. That's when they called in our unit. Officially, we were supposed to assess environmental hazards from a distance. Radiation, gas leaks, that sort of thing. Unofficially, we were to find out what the hell had happened and report back fast. No police, no media. Not yet. From the moment we arrived, something felt wrong. It wasn't the kind of wrong you could point to. No bodies, no blood, no signs of panic or struggle. Quite the opposite. The town was pristine. The front gate to the village wasn't locked, just gently swaying in the breeze. The sound of its hinges the only noise for miles. Inside, everything was still in place. Lawn chairs arranged around a fire pit. Coffee mugs half full on porches. I passed a small schoolhouse where a chalkboard still had the day's lesson written in careful cursive. Soil composition and pollination patterns. The chairs were tucked in. Backpacks hung on hooks. One home had dinner still sitting on the table. Steamed vegetables, a roast of some kind. The food hadn't spoiled. The fire in the hearth was dying, but faintly warm. No signs of anyone. Not even the pets were left. No barking dogs. No cats darting across fences. Not a single bird in the sky. It was as if every living thing had been plucked out of existence in the same breathless moment. It wasn't until later that we reviewed the agricultural drone footage recovered from a nearby survey station. The drone had been doing routine flyovers to monitor crop health for one of the biotech firms funding the orchard expansion. The footage was dated exactly 2 weeks prior. At that time, the surrounding fields were nothing but frost-bitten soil. Dormant. Border. But when we compared it to the live aerial feed from our own drone, something didn't add up. The fields were no longer empty. What we saw was massive. A perfectly symmetrical orchard stretching from the village's edge out into the wilderness like a green stain. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of trees in flawless alignment. It didn't make sense. No signs of planting. No record of delivery. And the trees themselves. I zoomed in on the live feed. They didn't look right. Uniform height, every single one. Their bark had a strange sheen to it, a pale silver gray with veins running beneath the surface. The leaves were lush, almost too lush for the season. And most unsettling of all, as the drone hovered above, I saw the trees swaying. Not just in the wind, swaying together, in rhythm. We watched the footage on loop for nearly half an hour before someone noticed what we'd missed the first time. The branches weren't just swaying. They were expanding and contracting. Slowly, like lungs. At first, I convinced myself it was the wind. It had to be. Trees moved all the time. Even in still air, certain species have a natural tremor in their leaves or limbs. But as I stepped outside and looked around, the realization hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. The wind wasn't blowing. The air was dead still. Not a rustle, not a whisper. I held my breath and waited for the trees to stop. They didn't. We rotated the drone, circling around the orchard's perimeter, hoping to find some kind of entrance, a path, anything that would break the symmetry. There wasn't one. It was sealed. The trees were planted in a grid so tight, so perfect, that it seemed impossible for it to be natural or human. I began analyzing the spacing between the trees, and that's when I felt my chest tighten. Each tree stood precisely 3.33 meters apart. Not roughly, not estimated, down to the decimal. A pattern emerged on the monitor as I pulled the camera higher. The orchard wasn't just symmetrical, it was geometrically patterned in a shape I couldn't immediately identify. Concentric squares nested inside each other. Not random, deliberate. The realization chilled me deeper than the air ever could. This wasn't planted. This was designed. I tried to shake the paranoia growing inside me. Maybe the villagers had brought in a machine, a new agricultural prototype. Maybe the missing people were relocated due to some unexpected hazard. Maybe we were just overreacting. But the problem with that theory was this. There were no tracks. No sign of machinery. Not a single footprint. And the dirt was soft. It should have recorded every step, every tire, every shovel. Instead, it was clean. Too clean. Like the orchard had simply appeared. I couldn't help but think of the phrase one of our analysts mumbled when she saw the footage. The trees are breathing. She said it with a nervous laugh. A joke. But none of us laughed with her, because we were all thinking the same thing. It looked like they were breathing, and we were standing too close to their lungs. We walked into the orchard with slow, uncertain steps. Every footfall felt like trespassing. The boundary between field and grove had no fence, no change in terrain, just a line where the natural world stopped and something else began. The air shifted immediately. A wall of warmth, as if we'd stepped into a greenhouse, enveloped us. It was subtle at first, just a few degrees higher, a little more humid. But then it became impossible to ignore. The scent hit next. Sweet, almost floral, like overripe fruit left too long in a sealed room. But beneath that, there was something else, thick, musty, damp. A scent that clung to the back of the throat and reminded me of wet basements and things better left untouched. It wasn't rot, not quite. More like the perfume of something trying very hard to mask it. The trees surrounded us in impossible uniformity. Each one stood at precisely the same height, their canopies rising like domes of green glass above us. Their trunks were too smooth, with no knots or breaks, no signs of growth or aging. I reached out and touched one. The bark yielded slightly under pressure, not rigid like wood, but pliable, almost like cured leather. It felt warm. The branches, thick and oddly symmetrical, extended outward at mirrored angles, each tree repeating the next like a biological copy-paste. I counted 7 branches per side, and 7 again on the opposite, 14 total. Not one more, not one less. Even the leaves were off, a rich, waxy green that shimmered unnaturally under our lights, almost metallic in the dark. They trembled gently, swaying as if in a breeze. But when I looked around, the grass and brush at our feet remained still. No wind, no movement, just the trees. Someone radioed that they'd found something. A tree near the grove's center had a secretion pooling at its base, a slick, mucus-like fluid dripping steadily from a horizontal split in the trunk. It didn't look like sap. It was thinner, clearer, with the viscosity of raw egg whites. The puddle beneath it shimmered faintly under our flashlights. The moment one of the team members touched it, he recoiled, a spasm, followed by the sound of retching. He dropped to his knees and emptied his stomach onto the roots. When we helped him up, he couldn't speak, just pointed at his hand and turned away, shaking. We decided not to touch the trees again. We marked several for observation, placing thermal imaging cameras and motion sensors around the orchard's perimeter. A generator kept the equipment running. We retreated to the observation van parked just outside the village and watched the monitors as dusk settled over the grove. At first, there was nothing unusual. A slow drop in ambient light. The leaves continued their rhythmic tremble. No movement, no sound, just silence and the ever-present warmth that bled outward from the orchard like heat from a furnace. But as midnight approached, the thermal cameras picked up something strange. Heat. Each tree began to emit a faint warmth, not from the bark, but from within. A central column of heat ran from root to canopy, pulsing slowly upward in waves. It looked like circulation. We turned up the sensitivity. The heat signature moved at regular intervals, slowly, predictably. The pulses reminded me of a sleeping heartbeat. Not erratic, not chaotic, just steady and calm, like something at rest. The readings were subtle at first, only a few degrees warmer than the surrounding environment. But by 2:30 a.m., the pattern had changed. The pulses began to accelerate. Not rapidly, but enough to notice. The core heat inside each tree rose degree by degree, and the movement inside became more defined. We enhanced the thermal contrast. The upward surges now had shape, narrow at the base, widening toward the top. Something inside the trees was rising. It wasn't just heat, it was mass. At 3:03 a.m., the temperature inside the trunks spiked, brief, sharp bursts in each tree that lasted exactly 3 seconds, then fell back. The pulses synchronized. Every tree emitted the same heat surge in perfect timing, like a collective contraction. Something inside was stirring. The team grew quiet. We stopped speaking altogether. No one wanted to say the obvious out loud. The sensors had no audio, just visuals and data feeds, but in that silence, it felt as though the trees were beginning to wake up. The orchard glowed on our screens like veins under skin. Living veins. For a brief moment, the pulse stopped entirely. The trees went cold. The image flatlined. We thought the equipment had failed. Then the heat signatures reversed. Instead of rising, the thermal mass within the trees began to descend, as if whatever had moved up the trunks was returning to the roots. Or worse, leaving. We watched in horror as the pulses shrank and twisted into narrow shapes. Long, thin, serpentine trails descending through the trunks and vanishing into the earth. We couldn't confirm what it was. We didn't know if it was biological, mechanical, or something else entirely. But something had moved through those trees like fluid through a system, or blood through a body. At 3:21 a.m., the thermal feed cut to static. All cameras failed simultaneously. We checked the generator, still running. Cables intact. No surfe, no tampering. Something had shut them off. We didn't sleep. As the first light of morning broke over the orchard, the trees stood motionless again. No heat, no tremble. Perfectly still. The mucus puddle had dried to a clear, sticky film. No trace of the heat signatures we'd seen. It was as if nothing had happened. But we knew better. Whatever lived inside those trees, it wasn't sleeping anymore. By morning, the air had cooled, but the dread remained. It clung to the back of the throat, a taste of something acrid and wrong. We moved mechanically through the early hours, coffee, equipment checks, routine chatter none of us meant. No one mentioned the thermal footage. It wasn't until the second cup that we noticed she was gone. Her cot was still unmade, blankets folded neatly, untouched, backpack untouched, radio silent. But her boots, they were at the edge of the orchard, placed side by side, soles aligned to the inch. A silent offering. We scrambled through our recordings, hoping, praying, it was a mistake. But there she was, time-stamped at 2:48 a.m. The footage showed her rising from her cot without hesitation. No pause, no straggle. She walked straight out of camp and toward the trees. Her gait was calm, steady. When she reached the orchard, she stepped between two trees. Not around them, through them. And then she vanished. Not faded, not obscured, just gone. We replayed the footage a dozen times, adjusting contrast, enhancing frames. There was no visual trickery. One frame showed her mid-stride between the trunks, the next, empty space. We searched, called out, even though we knew how pointless that was. The forest returned only silence, heavy and expectant. We marked the location and began to dig. At first, the soil felt normal, dense, loamy, rich with moisture. But only inches down, the texture changed. No roots, no worms, no stones, just granules. Small, rigid. Something clinked against the shovel blade. It was a tooth. Then another. Then dozens. We knelt there, fingers trembling, brushing away earth until the ground resembled an ossuary. Incisors, molars, fragments of jaw. All human, all aged and yellowed, but some disturbingly intact. There were too many for one person. We stumbled back from the pit and stared at the trees. What we'd assumed were roots now looked different. They curved unnaturally, some looping in patterns no real root system would form. Others split at sharp angles, hollow in the center. Like tubes, or veins. We had to know more. One of us, the youngest in the group, stepped forward with a hooked blade and made a shallow incision across the bark of a nearby tree. It sighed, not loudly but audibly, a low, wet sound, half breath, half pressure release. From the cut oozed a thin mist, almost invisible until it caught the light. The scent changed instantly. Metallic, sweet, too sweet. And then the voices started. It wasn't immediate, more like a memory at first. Familiar syllables, indistinct, rising like smoke. Then names, then pleas. I heard my own name whispered with such intimacy, it froze me in place. Not just spoken, known. Each of us heard something different. Some knelt weeping. Others shouted at unseen things, their eyes darting towards shadows that weren't there. I pressed my palm to my chest to steady myself and realized I was crying. I hadn't even noticed. The one who'd made the cut gripped his blade again, said he had to go deeper, had to find the source of the voice. He cut again. The bark split like flesh, and what spilled out wasn't sap. It was red and thick. The tree convulsed. Its branches snapped upward like seized muscles. The leaves rippled in a sharp wave outward, one after another like a shuddering breath. The wound throbbed. Something moved inside. We pulled him back before he could slice again. His face was streaked with tears, and the mist had soaked his shirt. His lips moved, mouthing a name none of us recognized. He didn't blink. The voice he'd heard, he swore it was his mother. She'd been dead for years. He said she was waiting for him inside. That's when the denial finally gave way to clarity. These weren't trees. They were imitations. Biological puppets, grown, not planted, designed to pass as flora, but only from a distance. Up close, they betrayed themselves. No insects landed on their leaves. No birds rested in their branches. No decay, no nests, no signs of life around them. Only within. We began noticing other patterns. The soil temperature directly beneath the trees was rising, 2 degrees higher than the surrounding ground. The spacing, still flawless, now began to show subtle expansion. Measurements we'd taken just yesterday were off. Each tree was now nearly 2 inches farther apart than before. The orchard wasn't static. It was growing, and whatever was inside them was no longer content to remain still. We packed in under 20 minutes. Tents collapsed, equipment stuffed haphazardly into crates, laptops still running, cords dragging in the dirt. No one said it, but we all knew. We couldn't stay another night. Whatever illusion of control we'd clung to was gone. The orchard was alive, and it was moving. The road should have taken us east, then north. That's what the map said. That's what the GPS repeated. But 20 minutes into the drive, the forest thickened unnaturally. Landmarks reappeared, trees we'd marked, a rusted road sign we'd passed once before. The sun shifted, wrong for the time of day, casting shadows from the same direction we'd just left. The GPS insisted we were making progress, the line inching forward across the screen. But the reality outside the windshield told another story. We were driving in a loop. At first, it wasn't obvious. The road didn't spiral. It didn't visibly bend back. But something was folding around us, space or time or the orchard itself. We tried side roads, paths through the forest, even left the vehicle and walked in a straight line through brush and mud, using compasses and flags to guide us. We still returned to the village. The trees greeted us with silence. Not rustling, not swaying. Just standing there, waiting. Later that afternoon, we lost power to the main generator. Not from use. The cable had been cleanly severed, as if by a hot blade. No footprints nearby. No signs of animals. Only a faint, acidic scent in the air and a slow, sticky drip from the branches above. That's when we noticed the edge of the orchard was no longer where we left it. The trees had moved. We confirmed it with our maps and mark stakes. The boundary had advanced several meters into the village. One of the homes, the same one with dinner still on the table, was now half consumed. A tree had grown directly through the living room, its trunk bisecting the structure as if it had always been there. But there was no cracking in the foundation, no damage to the floor. The tree hadn't pushed through, it had replaced it. More buildings followed. We set up time-lapse cameras, watching the village perimeter over hours. The orchard expanded in slow, deliberate motions, like the tide pulling forward and never retreating. Satellite imagery confirmed it. The trees were spreading measurably daily. The perfect grid wasn't breaking. It was absorbing, wrapping itself around homes, fences, sheds. Entire roads were swallowed, replaced with rows of identical trunks. At dusk, another was taken. We heard it first, a muffled cry from the edge of camp, then a wet, stretching sound like bark tearing apart. By the time we reached him, he was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, only a single tree, trembling. Its trunk was misshapen, bloated, pulsing slightly, and split down the center like lips held barely closed. The cry came again, fainter this time. From inside, the trunk twitched, parted for the briefest second, revealing something soft, human, pressed against an inner membrane. A palm, then an eye, still conscious, staring. The bark resealed with a wet snap. There was nothing we could do. We stopped sleeping, took turns watching the orchard, listening to the rustle of branches even when the air was still. The trees whispered in pulses, not words but intentions. A rhythm forming, the same beat we'd seen in the thermal footage. All puls, all bras, all betskoning. Desperate, we launched the last drone, our strongest signal booster, straight up. No lateral sweep, no mapping run, just vertical. We watched its feed on every screen we had. At 300 feet, the tops of the trees revealed the grid. At 500, the pattern changed. The rows bent subtly inward. At 1,000, it was undeniable. The orchard wasn't random. It formed a spiral, a perfect logarithmic spiral, arms twisting outward from a central point, too large to see from the ground. Each new tree grew precisely into place, preserving the symmetry. The spiral extended far beyond the village, past the forest, past what should have been physically possible. The drone hit 1,800 feet before the feed cut. We tried uploading archived satellite images, looking for inconsistencies in the terrain. We traced back 5 years, then 10. No chith, no spaited. Then we found an image from 15 years ago. Infrared, lower resolution, but enough. Buried beneath the topsoil, barely distinguishable from natural geological formations, was a ghostly spiral pattern. The same shape, the same proportions. It had been there the whole time. Dormant, underground. The village hadn't been built near it. It had been built on top of it. The orchard wasn't spreading. It was emerging, and we were standing in the center of its awakening. I haven't spoken in days. Not out loud. There's no one left to hear me anyway. The others are gone. Some taken swiftly, others piece by piece. At first, I thought I was lucky to survive. Now I understand that survival isn't always the better option. The trees don't pretend anymore. When I move, they lean. Subtle at first, like shadows, shifting, but now their trunks bend inward, branches curling unnaturally toward me, slow and deliberate. The sound they make is unlike wine through leaves. It's wet, intimate, as though they're exhaling something moist and heavy. I don't sleep, but I must have. My camera recorded footage I never took. When I retrieved it this morning, the lens was smeared with something clear and gelatinous. The device turned on by itself. The screen lit up and played a clip I couldn't recall capturing. It showed me, curled on the floor of the monitoring tent, eyes closed. The angle was impossible. From above. I live alone in this camp. I tried deleting the file, but it played again on loop. This time, there was something else, a second figure in the footage, barely visible in the corner of the frame. It was crouched beside me, motionless, limbs too long, spine arched backward like a branch caught mid-sway. Its head leaned in close to mine, and though its face was shrouded, I recognized the posture. It was mimicking me. I smashed the camera, but its screen stayed lit. It glowed faintly with a single blinking icon, recording. And the trees were watching. Their trunks have split open in the night. I see them yawn like mouths, thin seams parting to reveal slick walls and pulsing veins beneath bark. No longer tree-like, no longer pretending. Inside, I see eyes. Human, animal, I don't know. They flutter open for moments, then close again. But I feel them, watching, remembering. When I breathe, I hear my own voice echoing from deep within their cores. It doesn't match the rhythm of my chest. It's delayed, like a playback, like something trying to learn. I ran. I thought maybe if I moved fast enough, I could make it beyond the spiral, beyond whatever boundary held me here. I ran between the trunks, pushing through the branches, ducking under arched boughs that grew tighter with every step. The orchard shifted around me. Trees rearranged themselves as I passed. The spacing, once exact, began to close. At first just claustrophobic, then suffocating. The trunks thickened. The gaps narrowed. Roots lifted from the ground, forming walls beneath my feet, tripping me. I fell, but the ground didn't meet me with impact. It gave. Soft, springy, warm. I pushed up and felt skin. Not bark, not dirt. Seikin, a face. Half buried, features slack, mouth open in a permanent grin. Eyes sealed shut as if in sleep. But the skin pulsed with life, slow, steady like breath. The face was familiar. One of the villagers. I'd seen her photo pinned to a corkboard in the survey office. A woman who had once taught at the village's tiny school. Her lower body was gone, replaced with tangled roots and soil. Her scalp had split in places, thin green shoots pushing out from beneath the skin. She smiled wider. I crawled away, dragging myself over roots that no longer felt like roots. They were tendons now, cords of muscle that throbbed when I touched them. My hands came away slick with sap or blood. It didn't matter anymore. My radio squawked once and died. Static filled my headset, a low growl beneath the hiss. I tore it off, but the hum stayed. It wasn't in the device. It was everywhere. A vibration under my skin, inside my ears, in my teeth. Like breath. Like something inhaling the world. I made it back to camp, barely. The tent was folded in on itself, collapsed like lungs exhaling. My equipment was gone. The soil where I'd once slept was hollowed out, lined with that same pulsing membrane I'd seen in the trees. I found the backup transmitter and activated one final signal burst. A last transmission, compressed, scrambled, corrupted. The file size grew larger than expected, as if something else was riding inside it. On playback, it was nothing but noise. White static. And beneath it, the rhythm. Like breath. Like roots drawing something downward. Or upward. I can't tell anymore. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. But I no longer feel hungry. My limbs ache, not from fatigue, but from stiffness. My fingers feel distant. Numb. The skin along my forearms itches violently. When I rolled up my sleeve, I saw the pattern. Fine lines branching out like veins. But not veins. Not human. I tried to wash them away, but the marks went deeper. Beneath the flesh. Beneath me. The trees no longer grow. I do. I can feel myself stretching, tethered to the soil, spreading underground. I dream now, with eyes wide open. I hear the orchard whispering, not to me, but through me. My breath matches the pulse now. I try to mark time, but the sun no longer moves. Or maybe I don't. I don't know where I end and the orchard begins.